Our immediate destination after leaving Scotland was the Faroe Islands, 200 miles away across the North Atlantic. Because of time constraints, we headed directly to Tórshavn, the capital of the country, which comprises 18 islands and is an autonomous county of Denmark. Venture was moored in the very heart of downtown, where she soon became the center of attention. The population of the Faroes is almost 50,000, of which around 19,000 live in the metropolitan area around Tórshavn. There is a small yacht harbour. Venture is tucked away to the left and cannot be seen in this view. An amazing network of roads links the majority of the islands, and most of our touring was done by car, through spectacular scenery almost entirely devoid of trees. Away from Tórshavn, the population still lives in small villages. Until the late 19th century, life was centered around each settlement, as communication between them was difficult and often fraught with danger due to the terrain and the unpredictable weather. Every harbour and road has been hard won, and the villages are dwarfed by their surroundings. Like most people, I knew little about the Faroes until I actually visited the country. Historians believe that the first parliament dates from AD 800, making it the first in Europe and probably the first in the world. Interestingly, DNA tests revealed that 87% of men are of Scandinavian origin, while 84% of women originate from Scotland and Ireland. Maybe Viking raids had something to do with that. Crew members on this leg were Steve D'Antonio, well known as a marine consultant and for his technical articles in Passage Maker magazine, and George Sass in the Green Jacket, an experienced professional photojournalist who accompanied us to Galapagos in Venture 1. All around is the restless ocean. Harbours have to be found where they can. In this case, no more than a cleft in the rocks. The name of the village that overlooks it is shown here. I'm not going to make any attempt to try to pronounce the name of the places we visited. Most villages have streams running through them, which is no doubt the reason they were built there in the first place. The national flower is the marsh marigold, and the national bird the oyster catcher, with its distinctive cry. We took a ferry to the remote island of Mykonos. Weather permitting, the small boat follows the dotted blue line, once in the morning and once in the late afternoon. But the tiny harbour is exposed to turbulent seas, and especially during winter, the island can be isolated for weeks at a time. It takes nerves and skill to spin the boat around in the confined space against the force of the surging surf. The boat is a lifeline for the residents and brings the necessities of life to the island. The steps up from the jetty are steep. Cargo from the boat is moved with a quad and trailer. The weather in the Faroes can change from one minute to the next, but On the day of our visit to Mykonos, it remained cold, wet, and miserable. The island is surrounded by high cliffs, providing nesting sites for millions of puffins, which breed in burrows in the ground. This mist is actually a fine drizzle, which soon permeated our inadequate clothing. In no time we were thoroughly soaked, and so was all our camera gear. We chickened out on the 2-hour trek along the steep path to the lighthouse. We sheltered from the persistent rain inside this charming church. Local boats again showed their Viking heritage, and all were elaborately secured against the ferocious wind. They were pulled ashore up this near vertical slipway above the ferry landing. Flocks of kittiwakes gathered on the cliffs, and as the time approached for the ferry to return, the seas and the visibility had seriously deteriorated. But arrive she did, to the great relief of the waiting passengers, most of whom were a rambling group from the UK. My dictionary defines rambling as a leisurely country walk, seriously different to my way of thinking from the survival conditions hiking along the precipitous cliffs. Boarding meant timing it, to step aboard at the top of the swells as the boat heaved up and down. Those seated across the transom were in for a real drenching, as torrents of seawater swept over the cabin roof and cascaded over them. The wind is always present in these islands. This is the extreme north, and the island of Fugloy, like Mykonos, is only reachable by boat when weather permits. It is home to millions of seabirds, and 2 villages which are the most remote in the Faroes. Back in Tórshavn, the car ferry Smyril, linking the port with the southern islands, was just leaving her berth, and it was time for us to leave also and head directly to Iceland.